Greetings, warriors. My name's Pruitii, and welcome to the next episode of Can We Talk, Mom? I'm very happy with the reception for the first episode. It makes me very happy, fills my heart with lots of joy, and I'm just very excited to dive into this next topic because we are going to be talking about emotions and the wonderful world of handling them because emotions are a part of our everyday life, like part of it. And a lot of people, myself included, don't really understand how to regulate them and how to express them in a healthy way. No way in this episode am I saying that, pardon me, your emotions are invalid or your emotions are bad or anything like that. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying this episode is just how to express them in a healthy manner for you, because everybody deserves that. But to really do that, first we need to understand what the heck are emotions. Sure, we can say what emotions are. Okay, for example, tell me, write in the comments, what do you think emotions are? What do you think they are? Everybody has a different understanding of their own emotions and how they perceive it in others. So before we get into talking about regulating them and how to do that, I want a base definition. So, what are emotions? I wish I could give you just a nice, solid, simple answer, but there's a lot of different components to what makes up emotions. And to understand emotions, we need to understand the components of it. So let's first talk about the key elements of what makes an emotion. To start, emotions start from a stimulus, or rather known as a subjective experience, meaning that your emotions are felt by everybody. Everybody feels happiness on some sort of level, but the way happiness starts is subjective to each person. For example, somebody might feel anger and regret at somebody's passing, whereas another might feel intense sadness. These are still emotions that were brought up from an experience, but it is subjective because it's coming, from you and from your point of view. Another key element of emotion is this wow, that's going to be a hard word for me to say, and I have that written down quite a lot. Physiological response. There we go. Physical response. Maybe I should just say that. But these responses are like when your heart is beating faster when you are in fear, the lump in your throat when you are really sad. The fight or flight response is part of this. And the fight or flight response, if you don't really know that, is just a key survival mechanism that we have developed as we have evolved, where you either fight or flight. Fighting, you get aggressive and you tackle the thing head on, or you flight, where you flee. And these are responses that helped us evolve and survive as humans. These are intertwined with emotions. Another key element of emotion is the behavioral response. So this is typically what people associate with emotions. So the actual expression of it, like a smile, a grimace, a laugh, a sigh, that kind of stuff where you see it. These tie in a lot with societal norms and your own personality. Maybe when you get sad, you do a nervous, sad laugh or something like that. But yet that is your behavioral response to expressing an emotion. This understanding your behavioral response leads to a high emotional intelligence, which we will be talking about emotional intelligence a little bit later on. So, key elements of an emotion is the subjective experience, the physical response, because I'm not going to say that word, and the behavioral response. Another way you can put defining an emotion is how Professor James Gross says is the definition of emotion is the situation you are in, whatever is happening to you in that moment, the details you pay attention to, your appraisal of the situation means for you personally, and your response, including the physical changes and your behaviors. Again, that kind of ties in with the components that I talked about earlier. So, behavioral and physical, as well as your subjective experience, if you wanted to describe it that way as well. Professor Klaus Schurer, I'm totally butchering that name, I apologize, says that there are different factors of an emotion. So you have your feelings, your subjective feelings, like saying, I am scared. You have your appraisals, which are thought patterns, which are, I am under threat. You have your expressions, your facial and body, that kind of stuff. And then you also have your action tendencies. So, for example, freezing or hiding, or maybe you give yourself a big hug when you're feeling nervous, or physical. And the final one is physical changes. So, butterflies in your stomach, things that you can't really control compared to the expressions component of it. It was a lot of words for a lot of simple stuff, but emotions are what we feel in regards to a subjective experience that cause physical changes as well as behavioral changes. To roughly sum it up, but there's just so much that goes into an emotion where we can say, happiness. What is happiness though? How does happiness happen? And of course, there's a bunch of psychological studies that talk about how happiness happens, what it does in your brain, and all of that stuff. But that's a little too high level for us right now. And if you want to do that, I definitely recommend taking up psychology lessons or perusing the internet for more resources, because I am not a psychology teacher. I'm just a YouTube mom. But, okay, now that we understand the basic concept of emotions, let's get into the more nitty-gritty of it, narrowing it down more to understand, for example, happiness. Emotions can be categorized as anything in this world can be categorized. And most commonly, there is the category of basic emotions. Basic emotions are the ones that are associated with recognizable facial expressions that can happen without you really thinking about it. So those are, happiness, surprise, fear, anger, disgust, and sadness. These stem from the emotional psychologist Paul Ekman. He's kind of like the guiding force in this. I mean, he did eventually expand the basic emotions list to embarrassment, excitement, content, shame, pride, satisfaction, and amusement. But those adaptations aren't really widely accepted yet. So we're only going to focus on the basic 6, which he started with, happy, surprise, fear, anger, disgust, and sadness, But Charles Darwin, everybody's favorite person, suggested that emotion-induced facial expressions are universal, tying in with his theory of evolution. Because, there were people on an island. I can't remember exactly the details of this because I learned this in college. But there was a tribe on a very isolated island where, researchers made contact and they observed them and realized that they expressed emotion in this similar way that we do. Even though if we have completely different societies and completely different lives, they were still able to express similar emotions to what modern integrated society is, which I find personally very fascinating. And did you know that even animals are observed to have expressions. Obviously, they don't express it in the same way that we do, but they are able to express emotion. Isn't that weird? I mean, if you're a pet owner, you probably get that, because like you know what your pets are feeling when they're doing things, and it's so amazing to me that emotion is such a prominent thing that so many people and even animals can feel, and it's just it makes me feel so connected with humanity. But okay, back to the basic 6 emotions. We're going to dive deeper into understanding those basic 6, because when you have a fundamental understanding of the basic 6 emotions, you're able to kind of branch that out and understand it more. Like I'm a put a graph here. Look at this graph. This is just one of the many myriads of examples of emotion wheels that you can find on the internet. But you can take even this categorization of emotions and break it down even further and further and further, because like, how can you understand what it feels to be inferior if you can't really understand what fear is, you know? So that's why I want to focus on the main 6. Let's start with the one emotion that everyone strives for: happiness. It's described as a pleasant emotional state with feelings of well-being and satisfaction. Typically, the facial expressions that come about from happiness is, well, smiling. Yay! Typical body language that comes from happiness is a more relaxed stance, relaxed shoulders, and, not tense. And then typical tone of happiness is, well, upbeat and pleasant, like how I sound when I'm doing these, because these make me happy. On the flip side, quote unquote, we have sadness. Sadness is described as a transient emotional state with feelings of disappointment, grief, and hopelessness, that kind of stuff. Typical facial expressions for sadness is crying and frowning. Typical body language is, well, being withdrawn, having lethargy in your body, and just an overall sense of quietness. Quietness in the terms of, like, you're not, like, screaming your sadness, it's more, more quiet. That's the best way I could describe it. Okay, next up on the wheel of emotions is we have fear. So fear is a powerful emotion that connects very, very wholeheartedly to the fight or flight response, which I talked about earlier, because fear drives that. Fear drives whether you're going to fight or you're going to flight. Typical facial expressions with fear is widening of the eyes, pulling back of the chin, and body language, well, ties in with a flight or fight response, where you either hide or flee or you pull within yourself. And also, physical responses are like rapid breathing and rapid heartbeat and like sweating and that kind of stuff. The next one, which is disgust. It's the emotion that triggers revulsion. Like, you smell something bad? That's disgust when you smell it. Typical facial expressions is the wrinkling of the nose, the curling of the upper lip, which I can't make my model do, unfortunately. And then body expressions is turning away from the object, or, well, you can even get even further and say physical responses of vomiting or retching, if it's that bad. Hopefully you guys don't experience disgust that bad. Second to last is, well, anger. Anger is a powerful emotion that has feelings of hostility, agitation, frustration, and funnily enough, that can also tie into your fight or flight response, because, the fight part comes with the anger. Typical facial expressions are frowning or glaring, and as for body responses, it's like a strong stance, you're broad, and sometimes it could be just turning away from it as well. Typically, when you are angry, you have a gruffer tone of voice, or you tend to yell and have aggressive behaviors, such as hitting, kicking, and throwing. which we'll talk about later. And finally, we have surprise. This emotion, more so than the others, can be very in the middle of things. So your surprise can be a positive surprise when you are presented with something positive, or the surprise can be more negative, where you are like being shocked with something, tying in closer to fear. So surprise is kind of like this intermingling one that likes to hang out with both happiness and anger and fear. You know, it's like everybody's buddy. But it's essentially shock. It could be, you know, good, bad, negative, whatever. It's surrounding the physical stimulus, what I'm getting at. Facial expressions could be raising of the eyebrows, the widening of the eyes, the opening of the mouth, going, aw. Physical responses could be jumping back or triggering some verbal things like yelling, screaming, or gasping, and, you know, fight or flight because fear. So now we have talked about the basic emotions: anger, disgust, sadness, happiness, surprise, and fear. But I want you to know something. There are some words that I used when describing them, like positive and negative. I want you to take a moment. When you think of happiness, do you associate it as a positive or a negative emotion? How about anger? Do you categorize it as a positive or a negative emotion? Unfortunately, that's part of society and how we have grown to understand our emotions. We tend to categorize them into positive ones or negative ones, pretty much disvaluing the ones that we call negative because we, quote unquote, shouldn't feel them. Scientific researchers call the positive and negative quality of emotion the affective valence. While this concept is okay for understanding the emotion, because, well, when you are sad, you tend to feel not good, so that means negative. But it reduces the complexity of emotions so much, and it really can be damaging to view these emotions in terms of positive or negative. For example, like love and hate are often conceived as polar opposites. You know, you hate one thing, you love another thing. But the two of them coexist and are more complementary than direct opposites. Because love can be so much more painful and destructive than hate sometimes. And hate can be more positive and hate can be so much more beneficial than love sometimes. It creates this dichotomy of understanding your emotions. Like, for example, let's dive deeper into anger, because typically anger is associated as one of those negative basic emotions. However, it's a lot more complex than that. It can be classified as negative when the hate or the anger is towards another person. However, it can be positive for the person who is feeling the anger when it's used in an appropriate and healthy way. For example, the feminist movement. They realize they have a right to be angry about their situation in life, and they used their anger in a healthy and productive way that gained a positive outcome. I want you, dear viewer, if you learn nothing else from this video, is to take this point. Do not limit yourself to thinking that all of the basic emotions are positive or negative. You can feel positive sadness. You can feel negative surprise. What is most important is how you process and use these emotions and how you enact the behavior. It's okay to feel the negative side of the basic emotions. Hell, it's okay to feel any sort of negative thing at all. Because what you feel is completely valid. Again, because emotions come from a subjective experience. I don't know how you process things. Only you know how. And I want you to learn that it's okay to feel these things, and it's okay to feel bad. What's most important is what you do with it. Okay? Okay? You hear me? You hear me? Write it down on a sticky note if you have to. But, did you know, fun fact, that you can actually have secondary emotions? So we have our basic emotions, right? You know, which we've been talking about for a good little while. But the secondary emotions are your emotional response to primary, like, basic emotions. So, for example, I am frustrated because I'm sad. Like, isn't that weird to think about? You can have emotions about your emotions. It's crazy. I just wanted to put that in here because I thought it was fun. Kind of a light tangent, you know, after me yelling at your face to tell you to not limit yourself. All right. So now that we get an understanding of emotions and the basic categories of emotions with the basic emotions, and I could go on. I could go on forever and dive into the deeper categories of emotions, like what makes, you know, despair different than bored. But that, again, is all subjective to you, because I know how it feels for me, but I don't know how it feels for you. So take some time, if you want, to kind of just look at the wheel that I posted earlier and figure out how it feels for you to feel those things. Because it's really good to be comfortable with how you understand your emotions. And before we dive into, you know, actual, like, skills that you can do, I want to talk about the difference between some terminology. Don't get mood and emotion conflated. They are completely different things. Completely different. Sure, we can say, you know, you're feeling moody. That could be a mood, like an emotion, but like the actual term mood is different than emotion. So, mood, according to the APA, is a short-lived emotional state, usually of low intensity. But here's a key difference. Moods do not have stimuli like emotions do. Moods do not have stimuli. Oh no, my model died. There we go. That's the fun of recording these things and not doing much editing, is sometimes my model just dies. But anyways, moods do not have stimulation like emotions do. They don't really have a clear beginning. Let's take angry. You can feel angry after you've been insulted, but you can feel angry, an angry mood, just out of nowhere. It could be like you just start the day and you feel angry for no reason. Okay? They're typically short-lived, low intensity. Okay? No stimulus. And there's also feelings, the word feelings. So feelings are generated from our thoughts about our emotions. They are interpretations of emotions and how we let them sink in. These three things, emotions, feelings, and moods, intertwine, and they really create like this tapestry of what it means to feel and what it means to feel happy or sad or all of that. So I'm gonna slap another graphic on here to kind of like show how it all works. Like feelings And how we interpret them turn into emotions. And emotions sometimes even can turn into moods, and moods can affect your emotions. And it's all interwoven. But I want my voice died. Things are dying today. Let's all take a water break, yeah? Unironically, taking a water break when I have tea in front of me. Fun things with the model. But yes, I want you to understand the difference between the three because, it's important to know. It's important. Now that we understand emotion and the wonderful world behind it, let's dive into emotional regulation and emotional intelligence. So, emotional intelligence is your ability to perceive, control, and evaluate your emotions. This term was first identified by researchers Paddle. I tried to combining his first name and his last name. Oh no. Peter Salovey and John D. Mayer. Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage these emotions. But it also is the ability to do that with other people's emotions. So I know what it feels like for me to be happy. I know how it affects my body. I know what usually triggers it. And I take that basis of understanding and use it to understand other people's emotions. Like I use it to understand how others feel happy. Because while I can't feel exactly what they are feeling, I know how I feel when I'm happy. And it creates an intelligence that I'm able to use in my day-to-day life. So there are components of emotional intelligence. So there's the appraising and expressing of emotions in the self and others. So, the verbal and the non-verbal stuff. So what people say and what they don't, and how they act about it, and understanding that. Another part is regulating emotion in the self and others. So managing your own emotions and kind of guiding other emotions as well from others and guiding it towards a more positive outcome. And finally, using emotions in adaptive ways. So understanding your emotions and interpreting them in a way that results in positive outcomes instead of negative ones. Wow, my model is just having a hard time. So that's the basics of emotional intelligence. While that is a very useful skill, emotional intelligence is extremely hard for me, at least personally, to teach you. That comes from definitely understanding yourself and a lot of self-reflection. And some people even say that it's just something you were born with. I personally think that you can learn how to do emotional intelligence, but that is something that is very high level and very hard for someone who's not trained to teach. But I can teach you about emotional regulation, which is a component of emotional intelligence. Emotional regulation is the ability of an individual to modulate their emotion or a set of emotions. So, two kinds of emotional regulation. There's explicit, where you are consciously monitoring your emotions and using techniques in an active way to manage them, and maybe like changing the target of emotion or doing all of that kind of things in a way that is likely to produce a positive outcome. And a part of it also is recognizing how different behaviors can be used in the service of an emotional state. Like with angry tends to create a lot of violent tendencies like punching and kicking and throwing. But Emotional regulation deals with how you express that behavior. So explicit emotional regulation would be like stopping yourself from punching somebody when you're angry, or stopping yourself when you are about to insult somebody out of anger or out of, any other emotion. The other kind is implicit, where you're doing it without really any deliberate moderating. It's kind of like in the background, passive. Like it modulates more of the intensity of your emotion, and you don't really need to think about it all that much. But emotional regulation is learned. Not everyone is given the knowledge on how to regulate their emotions and the behaviors that stem from them. For example, let's talk about toddlers, because I'm very familiar with this. There's that common saying of the terrible twos. You might have seen toddlers that are 2 years old, throwing tantrums. Where does that stem from? Are they just so angry and irrational? They're 2. They haven't learned their emotions and how to be comfortable with them and how to regulate them. And that's when 2-year-olds are developing, that's when emotions start becoming more intense. They start feeling more things. So tantrums aren't bad. They are a good sign of your toddler learning about their emotions. What's bad is the behavior that comes from it. And that's where grown-ups step in and guide them through emotional regulation. And that's hard to do when you don't know how to do it. Emotional regulation, I want to say though, is not suppressing or avoiding your emotions. It's not that at all. That's hiding. That's destructive behavior. Emotional regulation is encouraging you to feel the things that you are feeling and being able to control the behaviors that stem from the emotions, and controlling your emotions in such a way that you can thrive and fully be the amazing person that you are. Emotional regulation. Wow, I've said that word so many times. Why did I trip up there? But emotional regulation can also be kind of like up regulation or amping up your emotions. So instead of like putting a hard stop on your anger and insulting someone, it could be literally vamping it up and like hyping yourself up for something, whether like you're going into a challenge where you need to have that adrenaline boost or that excitement, that you can build that up because you have the skills that you need to do that. With regulating our emotions, we guide our emotions into a healthier place and manage how we express them in beneficial ways. This is kind of tying back into how we view emotions to be positive or negative. It is all about the behaviors that stem from the emotions. Positive anger, like I talked about earlier, is using it and doing something good with it. Creating a force of good, like how women did when they realized how unjust things were, like how we couldn't fucking vote. And that's positive expression of behavior and your emotions. The negative is, well, I talked about it earlier, the punching and the kicking and the throwing. That's negative because that's harming others and harming yourself in the long run. So, you get it, right? You get the understanding of emotional regulation. We'll talk about how to do it in a little bit, but I want to talk to you about why it's important. Because sure, I've kind of dropped some breadcrumbs here and there about how beneficial it is, but I want to just sit down and take a moment and stare at you and say, these are the reasons why you should learn emotional regulation. The first one is intentional decisions. Being able to regulate our emotions allows us to make healthy decisions over our behaviors rather than letting our emotions be the dictator of our behaviors. Let me paint a picture for you. You had just a shit day at work or school or whatever you were doing. Maybe you were volunteering or something like that. You get home and you are just angry. You are just done with everything. Without emotional regulation, your anger can come out in ways that you don't want. For example, you just start berating the people at your house for doing something small, some minuscule mistake, when you don't really want to berate them. You just can't express your anger in a healthy way. With emotional regulation, however, you accept your anger. You accept how it feels and how uncomfortable that you feel with it. But you have the power to act in a way that you want. You're not out of control. You are in control. Tying in also with making intentional decisions, emotional regulation brings about skills of problem solving. When you are dealt with an emotion that you don't want to express in an unhealthy way, you have to problem solve on how you want to express it. It's working on the muscles and the skills that you need to problem solve. And I think that's amazing because problem solving is a part of life and we deal with that so much. And if we can work on those skills by just working on our emotions and how we express them, I find that to be amazing. Another benefit of emotional regulation is constructive communication. With it, you can get to a better place of understanding with the people around you. The words you say no longer come from just raw, pure emotion, but from a place of peace and understanding with knowing your emotions. If you are able to understand your emotions and manage the behaviors that come from it, you're able to communicate healthily what you are feeling. I know that there have been many couples that have gotten into arguments that are so heated and they want the best for each other. But in the end, they just end up insulting one another because they don't know how to express their emotions in a healthy way. But when you are able to, you're able to say, hey, this argument's getting a little too intense. I am feeling extremely angry. I want to stop before I hurt you. It creates healthy relationships that you are able to trust in one another, that you have your feelings, I have mine, but we're not going to use them as weapons. Because emotions shouldn't be weapons. They are just things that we experience and full of so many complexities. And others aren't going to understand unless we use our words. And we can't use our words until we regulate how we feel and the emotions and behaviors that stem from it. The next positive for emotional regulation is, well, self-confidence, actually. With emotional regulation, you get very comfortable with how you express your emotions and how that feels for you. Sure, obviously there will still be uncomfortable moments because emotions can bring that up, but you understand yourself. It's no longer of a question of, oh, why am I feeling this? It's more of, I am feeling this. I accept that. But I will not let it produce negative behavior. the more that you come to understand yourself, emotions included, the more you're able to fight off thoughts of, I'm not good enough, I don't matter, I'm useless. It guides you into a better understanding of yourself so that you can say, I am good enough. I matter. Because you know yourself, your very core being. Emotional regulation also guides you away from unhealthy coping strategies like substance abuse or addictive traits like gambling, where those unhealthy coping strategies damage your self-image like they do. The emotional regulation also removes the belief about negative emotions and the general thought of, why did I act that way? Because when you're able to regulate and understand the feeling that you are feeling, you won't have those secondary feelings of, I hate that I'm sad. You can embrace that you were sad. And you won't be able to have those questions of, why did I act in such a way that I didn't want to? It removes regret because you're not going to harm others when you don't mean it. You're not going to do things that you don't like from your emotions. And all of those things wrapped up in a nice little bow boost self-confidence. And the final thing is improved mood. I talked about it earlier, but emotion and mood are different. And when you regulate your emotions in a healthy way, it can improve your overall mood. Your lows won't be as low, maybe, or you could bounce back from a down mood to something more stable faster. For me, example, I get something called ADHD burnout. I especially get this when I am feeling intense emotions for a long amount of time. It drains me and kind of puts me into this mood of just down and emptiness and just exhaustion. But as I'm getting better at regulating my emotions, I am able to, reduce, the ADHD burnout a little bit, but obviously that's just part of my brain function. But I reduce the intensity of my emotions. I am able to recover from this burnout in a healthier way. All of these things together is just amazing and wonderful for you and your life. Everyone should learn emotional regulation, and you can learn it at any stage in your life. So let's get into the skills you need and the ways that you do emotional regulation. All right. So skills for emotional regulation. As I said earlier, this is a very much a learned skill, and it will take a lot of time. I'm still learning it now, and I've been very dedicated to improving a lot of my things with my emotions because I have a lot of emotional intelligence, but sometimes I'm not very good at dealing with my own emotions. So, let's start with some basic skills that you can do every day to build up emotional regulation. The first thing you can do is create space. Emotions happen. You can't change that. You can't change what you feel. You can't say, I will not be angry anymore. That just doesn't happen. you can't trigger them either intentionally. You can't like say, I'm going to be sad now. It happens. The first step to do when having emotional regulation is creating space for you to have that emotion, to give that pause, to take a big breath and slow down between the trigger and your response for your emotion. It's hard. It's hard to recognize that when you're feeling something that can create negative behaviors, stopping yourself seems hard. But you can do it. I promise you. Another skill that you can do for emotional regulation is, well, just noticing how you feel. We are so caught up in the hustle and bustle of life that we hardly ever have time to sit down and say, I feel this because of this. It's less that and more of, it's in the back of your mind at all times and you're not giving it the attention it deserves. And then it just starts building and building and building, and then it'll explode into chaos and a hard emotion to deal with. So become curious about your emotions and the physical responses that they come up like in you. What are you feeling alongside the emotion? Are you feeling tenseness in your body? Is your stomach upset? Like, tie your emotion with some of the physical sensations that you are feeling. And if you can't identify your emotion, use these physical sensations to lead up to what you are feeling. Inquire, question, learn. Understanding this and understanding even like the physical aspects of your emotion will distract the focus on the intensity of it and more of the foundation of it, so that the intensity doesn't make you do things that you don't want to do. Another skill that you will start to develop for emotional regulation is, well, naming it. Naming the feeling. Ask yourself, what words would I use to call this feeling? If you can, like, you don't have to be super specific with it. You don't have to say that you are feeling, I don't know, like jubilation or something like that. You don't have to be super, super detailed. If you can use one of the basic 6 emotions, that is a wonderful starting point, because it gets you understanding what you were feeling, a word to it. Often we feel more emotions than one at a time. So if you're feeling multiple things, identify the multiple of things that you are feeling. It's good and healthy to know and name the things that you are feeling. Once you have a word or words that name what you are experiencing, try digging a little bit deeper, If you are feeling afraid, why are you feeling afraid? What is making you feel afraid? By doing this, it brings you to a closer step in being able to express your emotions healthily so that you can regulate them. You can't regulate something if you don't know what it is, right? I mean, don't talk to me about Congress. Don't talk to me about Congress. Don't talk to me about all of the women's reproductive rights, okay? Shh. But it's important to understand what you are regulating before you can regulate it. Another skill is accepting the emotion. I'm looking at some of you guys because I know that some of you out there listening to this try to reject some of the things that you're feeling. Like, I know I do it. For example, I can get sad over the stupidest of things sometimes. They could be so small, so minute, and then I get a secondary feeling or the secondary emotion of I'm frustrated that I'm sad. This is such a small thing to be sad over, causing a clash of friction. But accepting it allows me to process it and say, yes, I can be sad over that small thing because that is what I feel. That is my emotions. That is a part of me. Emotions are normal and natural, regardless of the stimuli that activates them. When you are recognizing and accepting your emotion, it creates a comfortable place for you to be in so that you rein it in a bit, so that you don't have to lash out in ways that you don't want to, or do unproductive and destructive behaviors, because you are accepting what you are feeling and you're able to understand it. And the final skill I can say for emotional regulation is practicing mindfulness. Now, this is the one I struggle with the most. It's so hard to be mindful, but don't worry, we'll be talking about that in the future. But mindfulness helps us live in the moment, paying attention to what's around us and what's inside of us. Take time to notice what's happening around you without judgment. Are you feeling afraid because you saw a bee fly in your face? Okay, give yourself that space you need, recognize it, name it, accept it, and look around. Do you see a swarm of bees? Or was it just one bee? One bee still can be terrifying, yes. But recognizing that and recognizing what's going on around you helps you rein in the emotion and brings you back to a state of calm that can help you avoid engaging in negative thought patterns when you're in the midst of emotional turmoil and chaos. So those skills, creating space, noticing what you feel, naming what you feel, accepting the emotion, and practicing mindfulness are all parts of emotional regulation. These are the things that we can do day to day to improve the skill of emotional regulation. So my homework assignment for you, lots of homework assignments I feel like with this, but I want you to start practicing one of these things. If you can't name what you feel, that's okay. It's hard. It's hard. It takes time. Instead, practice creating space for you when you are noticing your emotions are very high. Create that space and start making it a part of your everyday functions. Because as you build up these skills, you're building up your emotional regulation. Thus, your understanding of your emotions and your emotional intelligence and the life you lead. So I want to give you a couple of strategies to work on while you are doing these things. These are very much long-term type of things and very much like not in the moment. Things that you ponder when you're not really thinking about anything kind of things. So one of them, strategy, is identifying and reducing your triggers. Again, don't avoid negative emotions. Negative emotions are okay. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel disgust. They are valid. But what's most important is identifying and reducing the things that impact you in negative behavioral ways. For example, look for patterns that you have when you're feeling strong emotions. A strong emotion I tend to feel a lot is, a very destructive emotion I tend to feel a lot is self-hatred. I used to feel a lot of self-hatred in the past. And what I did was I identified the things that made me hate myself and reduced them. I reduced a lot of things around my life that were not beneficial to how I viewed myself. And that created space for me to feel that less so that I can feel at least neutral about myself more. Or maybe, say, you might be embarrassed when you're talking about something sensitive. Maybe it's something small that you really don't want to talk about and you feel embarrassed about that. Understanding that embarrassment might be enough for you. That, hey, when I talk about this, or when somebody brings up this, I feel embarrassed. Understanding it is powerful. Maybe you need to take a step to remove it more, reduce it more. Say, hey, I don't want to talk about that for a myriad of reasons. You don't have to give that the exact reason why. You could say, I don't want to talk about that. And you are reducing the chance of getting affected by it. Yeah? Makes sense? I hope I'm making sense. Sometimes I get so deep into my notes and so deep into talking that I'm just like, am I making sense? Because I don't remember what I said 20 minutes ago. ADHD. Another strategy to start implementing is engaging in positive self-talk. Positive self-talk. Very important. Our emotions can be very overwhelming, as I'm sure all of you have experienced in the past. But self-talk can become so negative with our emotions when, say, we lash out and do a negative behavior, and then we start saying things like, oh, I messed up again, everyone else is awful, this all sucks, I suck. That kind of stuff is not beneficial to emotional regulation. If you treat yourself with empathy, you can replace that negative talk with positive comments, saying things like, I try so hard. I feel a lot of things, and I can express them in a way that is good for me. Shifting it like that can reduce the intensity of your emotions and help you understand that you can, deal with them in a healthy way. Wow. For example, right now, I feel like a failure because my model is having so many problems. This mom talk, Let's Talk Mom podcast. And if you're just listening to this, you probably wouldn't even know that I'm not having issues with my model, except for the couple of times I mentioned it. But I feel angry, frustrated, and embarrassed by it because it feels so unprofessional. And it's making me feel like I'm a failure. Whereas a more positive self-talk would be, you are doing amazing, Pruitii. There's just something going on with your programs today that you can't fix. It's out of your control, but you are doing the best you can with the situation that you were given, and you are wonderful. Engaging in stuff like that helps me get less angry at my model and more able to, well, continue this recording. Woo! It's all about changing that mindset. Again, this is a strategy. It's gonna take some time. Trust me. Trust me. Trust me. Next strategy is kind of making a game plan on how you want to respond to your emotions. So, say if you're a very angry person, you know that you tend to default to aggressive behaviors. Make a game plan for how you want to express your anger then. Maybe you want to take the anger you're feeling and maybe like put it into like a slime. Like you're playing with a slime or a fidget toy and you're putting all of your anger into that. That's a game plan that you are making so that when you recognize the anger, you're able to say, I have a plan. And you are able to go to the plan instead of going back to the negative behavioral tendencies that you notice in yourself. So, as you're starting to feel your emotions and the behaviors that are associated with them, even the positive ones, I want you to make a game plan for, because like a lot of the times I feel a lot of love and I don't express it in the way that I want to express it. But if I can't come up with a game plan, I'm able to say, oh, wait, I am feeling love right now. My game plan to express my love is this. So regardless of the emotion, recognize how you act to it, your behaviors with it, and make a plan on how you want to feel with that way. Okay? Workshop it. It's not going to be something that you say like, this is the forever plan. It's a strategy. It's going to evolve over time. And finally, the last strategy that you can do is seeking out a therapist. I feel like a lot of these episodes are just going to end up with me saying, hey, therapy. But it's true. Therapy is so powerful because a lot of people lack self-awareness and a lot of inability to do a lot of things. And whether that be learned behavior or things that you had to develop to cope, there are so many things that can block a healthy strategy and healthy skills for, emotional regulation. And therapists, their entire job is to guide you through understanding you and understanding how the different parts of your life interweave with one another. And they help you through this because you don't have to learn emotional regulation alone. You never have to learn anything alone because there is always someone there for you. And in this case, that's a therapist. If you are really struggling with the things that I have mentioned, with the skills that I've mentioned, or any of these strategies that I've been talking about, if you are struggling with them, please take that step and find yourself a therapist. Because that is going to do wonders for you in understanding your emotions and how to regulate them. And other parts of your life, but right now we're just talking about emotional regulation and emotions and feelings and all of that stuff, So, to recap our strategies, it is 1, identify and reduce your triggers. 2, engage in positive self-talk. 3, create a game plan on how you want to respond to your emotions. And 4, therapy. Oh man, maybe one of these episodes is just going to be I talk about my journey through therapy and how beneficial it has been for me and how I want everybody to find therapy. I know therapy is so hard to get into because of the cost, but I really recommend it wholeheartedly. Let's take another water break. It's been too long. But with that water break, that is the wonderful world of emotional regulation and understanding your emotions. It's a lot. I'm looking at how long this video is, and it's a lot. But these are all things that you are going to learn. Sure, some of us might be learning it later in life than we really wanted to. Like, for example, I am trying very hard to teach emotional regulation to my toddler so that when they get older, they have those skills that they can rely on when their emotions start developing more and more complexities. Whereas I only started learning about emotional regulation as an adult. I mean, sure, had emotional intelligence, but I wasn't really regulating my emotions in a healthy way. And I'm still learning. That's a wonderful thing of life, is you are constantly learning and constantly growing and constantly becoming a wonderful, wonderful human being. And I'm proud of you for sitting with me on this, well, as my husband put it, as my dissertation. But yeah, that is the world of emotions. And I know I assigned a couple of homework things for you in this, so do them. I can't exactly remember them because ADHD. But yeah, let me know what future topics you want me to talk about. The next episode should be about decisions and the choices that we make in life and that kind of stuff. I mean, the topic will eventually evolve because I need to do research and that kind of stuff, but that's sneak peek at next week. But please let me know any future topics that you want me to cover. I appreciate you guys so much for hanging out with me on this mom talk. Let's talk mom. I keep calling it mom talk because in all of my notes and my research and everything that isn't public, I titled this mom talk instead of the full name. Let's talk mom. That's fun. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching and subscribing. Keep fighting your battles, and I'll see you guys next time. Toodaloo!